when you wrote Watch My Back, you discovered that people held on to grudges. And as you said, like 30 years later, they would still relive a moment.
Like it was yesterday.
30 years ago. Yeah, and tell us a story about when you went into
the Chinese.
Yeah. and just tell us how long ago. I mean, like how the time gap between.
Well, I wrote the book, and of course, I was unsparing. I wrote about the good stuff and the bad stuff, and the criminals and the people that attacked me. I outed them and said what I really thought of them, and I didn't really care. I use pseudonyms and disguise people as much as I can. But people know, some of the people, unless you put a photograph of them and an arrow saying this is you, they wouldn't have recognised themselves. But other people knew it was them. And weren't very happy about my depiction of them. I wrote the book and cleansed myself by writing the book and the play and doing stuff. And then, like 20 years later, I'm stood in a Chinese takeaway, gone from a health food, of course, and I just feel this weight beside me, and I look over, and it's a guy that I had 3 run-ins with 20 years before. 3 run-ins and 1 massive fight, and. As soon as he just turned and looked at me, he was a big guy and very violent guy. As soon as he looked at me, his eyes watered straight away, and he was just full of emotion. And he said to me, "What you wrote about me in that book wasn't true." And I said, "It was true, but it was a long time ago." But I knew he wanted to go. I knew he wanted to fight, and I stood there with him. I went and sat down, and he was just bristling. And then the most miraculous thing happened. He was bristling and he was going to kick off. He was going to go. And suddenly this kid wandered in, this little girl, took his hand and said, "Daddy, Mum's waiting for you in the car." And they just disappeared. He never took his food. It just disappeared. And it was like, I always say that, when children appear on the scene, it's always a sign of God. He always appears in the form of a child. But so this monster, it was a daddy, he held his hand and took him out. But for him it was yesterday. So I had to be careful after Watch My Back came out, especially when I let go of the violence and I was no longer fighting. You couldn't just go into a pub, because people would be very pleased to see you and sit with you, and they'd want their photograph taken. But within 2 or 3 beers, a lot of them would be looking at you and going, "I don't see it." And then other people would come in with their grudges. So you didn't put them in that position. You just didn't. So I tended to meet up with old friends at funerals and weddings, but didn't go to the party afterwards. I didn't allow that situation to develop,
And you're a totally different person at that point. I mean, 20 years later, we think that we evolve and we change our perceptions, and some people get stuck.
Oh, he was still the same. He was still an alcoholic. Yeah. He was still, emotional about what happened. But this was a guy that, when I had the fight with him, he'd been barred from this place, and they'd asked me to come and remove him. But he put a glass in the barman's face, disfigured him for life. He threw a petrol bomb into one of the pubs where he used to work. It was, you know what I mean? How he couldn't see that he wasn't a nice guy. Yeah. Just because you take your mum shopping on a Sunday and you're nice with your kids, it doesn't make you a nice guy. Everyone said to me, when he's sober, he's lovely. I said, yeah, I've never seen him sober. And he was a charismatic guy. I knew him before this. I knew him when we were kids, and he was, he was a very dynamic and charismatic guy, and he could have a fight, but he was not a good man, and that's what people like me were paid for. We were paid to ask these people to leave. Did I tell you I beat him the first time I fought him? I beat him with a baseball cap.
Yes.
I went into the pub, and they couldn't get him out. He wouldn't go. And like I said, they were all frightened of him. And I went over to him and I said, "Come over here." And he was with all his mates. I separated him from his friends. And he walked over, and I took my hat off and threw it across the room. He goes, I'm going. And that was it.
Yeah.
That worked twice. First time I had a confrontation with him, I asked him to leave. He said, "No, I'm not leaving." He said, "I'll leave." I said, "No, you're leaving." I said, "It's not a discussion, you're leaving." He goes, "I'll leave after this drink." I said, "No, you won't leave after this drink, you'll leave now." He goes, "Okay." And he got to the door and he said, "I'll come back." I said, "Don't come back." I said, "I'm here now. You don't need to come back." I said, "If you want to fight, let's me and you do it on the pavement. You leave your friends here, I'll leave my friends there. Let's go." This was just a psychological fight.
Yeah.
And he just got into the taxi and went. So then the third time, none of that worked. I tried all of that, none of it worked. It was just a physical fight. And then it was, but he was such a violent guy, you couldn't give him anything. And then 20 years later I meet him, and he's like, let's go again.
Reliving it.
Yeah.